Hey guys, it's Cam here. Welcome back to the Build Room. In this week's episode, we're continuing work on our 1976 Toyota Celica, aka Violet Crumbles, and I have my fingers crossed that when we check out that rear end, it's not complete carnage. So stick around and check it out. Alright, so in last week's episode, we stripped all the paint off the rear end of Violet Crumbles in search of how bad the damage was, and what we found was pretty disappointing, to be honest. And also the boot lid that I had bought to replace the really rusted out one, that also seems to not fit anywhere close to what it should, and I'm not sure whether that's a dodgy repair on the boot or a dodgy repair on the boot lid. So, first things first today, we are going to shoot out to where my TA22 is stored. That has a virgin rear end and a beautiful boot lid. So we're going to bring the boot lid back here and we're going to have a look at the underside of that one as well to see how it measures up in comparison to Violet Crumbles. So let's get into it. All right, back to the storage locker and here with the Targa Top TA22. So while this has had a bunch of different body modifications, including obviously the Targa Top and the bracing underneath and the battery boxes in the boot, I don't think this has ever been in an accident. A lot of the panels, the front panels and bonnet and that were brand new OEMs, and I believe the boot might be the same. So yeah, this should be pretty cherry. I'll just pull it off and we'll have a look in the boot. And then with the boot off, we can see there is a little bit of tweaking in these rear bits, and I actually think that's from people that don't know where to put their hands pushing this shell around. But the main support there is going to be dead straight, and the rest of the floor of the boot and everything is as God intended. Now, I couldn't show them that much in the Supra episode, but those are the battery boxes. There's some big heavy duty truck batteries and some pretty well fabricated battery boxes, and there's also one over this side as well. But yeah, other than that, look, it's pretty basic. There's a lot of, I guess, glue and stuff like that on the back panel here, but it is super straight, and that's the main thing. The same with the boot lid. Looking through this, from the back, it looks almost perfect. There's a few little bits of, I guess, staining here. That could be from water, but most likely that's actually from fish oil or something that was thrown into this while it was painted. No dents on this whatsoever. On the top side, also looking very, very clean. So yeah, definitely a candidate for understanding what's wrong with Violet Crumbles. Now, as much as it's tempting to do so, I'm not going to pilfer parts off the Targa Top in order to improve Violet Crumbles. There is a bunch of parts that I have for this thing that I do have doubles of. A lot of the the parts that were on this car when the guy took it off the road, which was in the 80s. And it was a show car, so all of the parts are in pretty good nick anyway. I have a lot of those, and then I have brand new OEM parts that he had purchased. So for a lot of that stuff, what I'll probably do is take the stuff that's secondhand from this and put it onto Violet Crumbles, but it'll still be better than 99% of parts on the road. But let's not get distracted. What I want to do for now is jack the car up, get underneath of it. I have brought the light so we can at least see what we're doing and really inspect what the underside of the floor pan looks like here so that we can compare it to Violet Crumbles when we get home. All right, so here we are underneath the car. You can see, this was all undercoated or some form of sort of primer, sound deadener, something or other. Don't know what it actually is, but the whole underside of the car is done in that. Obviously, after the reinforcements were put in, you can actually see the reinforcing slightly better. You can see the big cross under the transmission tunnel there, and the fact that it joins into big rails, so just RHS tube that has been joined onto the bottom of the previous rails. Yeah, not sure if that's the method I would have used. I probably would have tried to wrap the rails in something bigger so I didn't increase the requirement for ground clearance so much. Now, the things that I'm really interested in looking at are the sorts of the gaps along the back here between the wheel well and this back panel. And part of this filming is really for my benefit more than it is for you, but also these back areas and what they look like. So, how it all ties together, which areas are straight, which have weird bends in them, like, this sort of thing. There's always the question of, is that supposed to be there or not? And at least on this car, I can say, yes, that's supposed to be there. And then I can go and look at Violet Crumbles and see if it's the same. Now, the main things that I sort of want to look at here is these areas over the diff mount, right? So, yeah, it's this area under here that I'm looking at to see whether it has, I guess, evidence of being crimped or or bent. So, you know, when you bend an exhaust or something like that on enough of an angle, it tends to crinkle. A lot of the rails that I've seen on these cars actually have some crinkling up here, and Violet Crumbles definitely does. So I would say it's a weak point anyway. So on Violet Crumbles, I'm not really worried that it may have been bent there at some point. What I'll be interested in is, did they get it back straight when they repaired the car? And if they're straight, what I'll probably do is weld on some reinforcing panels just so that it's not an ongoing weak point. I don't want to cut into the rails and try and cover it up or replace the metal. I simply want to make it structurally a little bit stronger, because, you know, that's never a bad thing on these sorts of cars. So yeah, blue diff is the standout. The actual car was this color originally. So if you ever saw a RA23 Celica in that blue at a car show, it might have been this car if you're in Perth. Anyway, I think we've got what we need from here. I can refer to all of this footage later on and make sure that if these do line up between the TA22 and the RA23, that I now have a good reference point. So yeah, let's leave it there and get back to the workshop. Actually, before we go, there is one thing that I do want to check, and that is the distance or the opening size of the boot. So I can see whether my one has been pushed forward. So here we have around 460. All right, job done, let's head back. All right, so back looking at the rear end again. You can see the problem here. If we push this boot lid all the way down, it's basically touching this panel here. But if you look at the ends, there's a good centimetre difference where it's lifting off. It's not even the same on both ends either. So the mystery of why that is like that is what we're trying to solve with that boot lid. So we'll get this up, pull this one off, and we'll get the new one on and see where we're at. All right, now bear in mind, I haven't aligned any of this, so we're just looking for close, but not perfect. But this is the moment of truth. Wow, what a difference that makes. And if we look at the gaps along here, I mean, to be honest, for a first pass, those are pretty impressive gaps, to be fair. So we can get all the way along this line now without any issue. And this, obviously this is in the wrong spot and it's a little bit tweaked up on this side, but that line follows that. I think this might still be a little bit far in, but I did measure that point so we can see whether that matches up. All right, and so if you remember, we were looking for 460 mil from the edge here to the center of the rear, and we have about 465 on this one. So close, and to be honest, you guys saw the one at my place had been slightly pushed in from people pushing on the tail light mounts rather than on the sides here, where if you have to push a Celica, you should be pushing from there. So I think that's close enough, and realistically, when we're talking about a chassis like this, it's never going to be exactly the same between two cars. The idea is you put everything together and you try and get alignment of your gaps and you move things around to get those alignments right. So yeah, that looks like it's close. So at least we know there's not major misalignment in the rear end and the chassis rails. Now I just want to really have a closer look at the floor pan and the rails. Some of this we can see from the top. So if we look in, just in here, you can see there is damage along this edge, and it's been, I don't even know what this is, poorly repaired. So obviously the impact has sort of crushed it down here and it's been pulled out. And what's happened there is we've pushed the bottom apron or the roll pan in, crushed this section up against the boot. And then there does look like there's some areas like this bit here. That to me looks like there was some tweaking which sort of maybe pushed this area upwards. You know, something like this is not worth trying to repair. This is not ever seen, it's not on the body. It's only if it impacts the structural integrity of the car. So let's jump underneath now and have a look at that. All right, so looking at the underside here, these areas aren't too bad. As soon as you hit this point though, you can see the damage starting to take shape. If we look up into this area here, see the crinkle there? We've seen some movement obviously away from that. That should basically be flat, nice and clean over there. So this bar has been pushed forward slightly. You can see in here, the reason I didn't take this off, which is the toe point, is that someone has welded it to this metal. So I'd say It just wasn't in a position to attach properly because it's slightly bent out of shape. So obviously doing the cheap and easiest repair that you can, you spot weld it to the body. In comparison to the TA22, you can quite clearly see this gap has been closed up. So there should be about a centimetre gap between this and this part of the spare tyre well. Now I can't see behind this area here obviously, but I'd imagine there's probably more damage to that reinforcing bar behind there. If we shoot to the other side, so we can see here that again this back panel is touching this support through here. But the main thing is the chassis rails. Now that, I don't know how well that shows up on film, but that's got a pretty significant kink in it. This whole thing has been sort of squashed down, I think. So we've got quite a big dent in there. And similarly, we've got slightly smaller one, but the same thing here. You can see that this area is misshapen. Same with that one. And then this, which makes me think that perhaps this was pulled out properly, like worse than this, and then pulled straight. If I come around to the other side, so you can see in here, there's all those little hammer marks. So someone has definitely gone to work on this before. I'd imagine they've done a pull to straighten the rear end out, and as they've been doing that, they've been hitting it there to relieve the tension and let it move back into its position. So yeah, I mean, all of this is just a best guess, but it is obvious that there was some attention here. So if the rear end's not too far out, I don't think I'm gonna question it too much, but I will, as I said, weld some plates in and strengthen this area. The reason it doesn't bother me too much, you can see the bolt here. So all of the pickups for the rear end are basically forward on the chassis of that. So this won't affect the driving alignment of the car. It's really just the aesthetic alignment of the rear end that is in question there. So yeah, it's not the best thing in the world, but it's also not the worst thing in the world. So for now, let's jump back to the workbench. I just want to talk briefly about what comes next for this. All right, so you guys have seen the damage, warts and all there, nothing is hidden. Now, before we get into what the future state for this thing is gonna look like, I just wanted to pause for a second to say thank you, and a big thank you to everyone who, after last week's episode, commented on the video or liked the video or emailed me direct or contacted me on Instagram to provide what was some really valuable feedback in terms of what you guys have done in this situation, but also a lot of encouragement around, you know, continuing on with the project and making sure we get it done, and that, you know, everyone has bad days. I will say at one point, binning Violet Crumbles and continuing on with Doofer or something else that was providing me less stress and more satisfaction was definitely on the cards. But you know, that stems from the fact that I think the last 3 or 4 episodes I've done on Violet Crumbles was all one episode after another where I was just uncovering more and more damage and more things that were going to delay the project. And it really does wear on you. But because you guys had commented on the video and liked it so quickly after I'd released it, YouTube actually picked it up and promoted it. And I got a good 24 hours of, not front page promotion, but certainly YouTube promotion. And we had about 3 times as many people watch that episode in the time frame. And because they were all new watchers, we actually got nearly 10 times the amount of new subscribers from that video. So look, apart from the fact that I just want to say thanks for being so supportive, I also want you guys to recognize that the engagement that you have with this channel is really important and really valuable. It really does mean a lot to me personally, and also means a lot for the channel's future. So thank you very much, guys. Moving on, the majority of the feedback that I got from you guys is that you wanted to see this thing on a rotisserie and done the right way. So it looks like Violet Crumbles is gonna be a little bit longer before it sees daylight, but you're going to see a completed project at the end of it rather than stage 1 of a 2 or 3 stage rebuild. In order to do that, the first step is the same as if I was just trying to fix the rear end and get this back on the ground, and that is to re-strip that rear end. Also pull the rear windscreen, and then in terms of the repair, I think what I'm going to be best off doing is to work from the back of the rear windscreen and repair backwards until I get to the back of the car. And then it'll just be that rear end panel that I am going to cut off based on what we've just seen there, and I'll replace it with a good piece. The issue with doing that is because the car isn't particularly straight at the moment, if I was to cut it off right now and do that first, it would be really hard for me to place the new rear end in the right position, because to be quite honest, there's really no straight areas on there to get measure points off. So what I am going to do is fix the rear parcel shelf and that rear rust first, get that great cherry boot lid back on, and then we'll align the rear end, the new rear end, with the boot lid, because that's really the only point of reference that makes any real impact to the visuals of the car. So yeah, that's the plan. Again, thanks for your support and your engagement. Really meaningful for me and the channel. But let's get back into it now and see where we can get to today. All right, so fully disassembled. The state of that rear parcel shelf is not great. I mean, it didn't look too bad in passing, but when you go back and shine a lot of light on it, you can actually see that it's missing the entire lip to mount the seal to. Just like the sides and the top, there should be a right angle area that the seal actually slips over to mount the windscreen in, and that is completely rusted away on this one. So there is a significant amount of rust there to repair in the next episode. But apart from that, it all came apart pretty well. Just a tip on the fuel tank, there are 3 hoses on top of the fuel tank which are rubber. They need to be removed because they fix to the hard lines under the parcel shelf. The braided line you don't need to remove because it attaches to the filler neck. As long as you take the filler cap off, remove the 3 screws that hold the neck in and let it release, you'll be fine without taking that off. The rubber hoses you should just cut. Don't waste your time trying to undo them. They're in a difficult spot to get to. They will be 20, 30, 40-year-old rubber. They will be perished and useless anyway, and all you'll do is skin your knuckles and have a devil of a time trying to get them out, only to have to replace them anyway, so just cut them in the first place. But yeah, that pretty much does us for today. Obviously next week is going to be full of templating, cutting, shaping, welding, grinding, all of that to try and get that rear parcel shelf into a decent shape. But we have definitely run out of time today. So standard things. If you enjoyed the episode and you want to see the channel grow, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Other than that, if you're new to the channel, and there should be a few of you new guys since last week, I'll put the full Violet Crumbles episodes here, and I'll put some of our other series down here. Other than that, I just want to say thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Build Room. Bye for now.